Monday Night Raw, April 1st, 2024, the Go-Home Show to WrestleMania 40. A show that saw The Rock and Roman Reigns literally give Cody Rhodes and Sethington Rollins the ass whooping for the ages. What? An ass whooping. What? An ass whooping for the ages. We'll talk all about it. The only segment on last night's show that had a pulse, because the rest of Monday Night Raw was uninspiring, uneventful, underwhelming, and unacceptable. This show last night didn't resemble anything close to what a go-home show, especially to WrestleMania, should look like. At the end of Raw last week, The Rock handed Paul Levesque McMahon a flawless finish. All Levesque McMahon has to do is carry that momentum, a little bit of consistency, put a slightly above average show on, and you'll be fine. Levesque McMahon instead panicked, he didn't know what to do, and he fumbled the ball. Yet again. A bunch of random matches, many of them with people that have nothing to do with WrestleMania. We'll talk all about it. This is going to be an amplified review of Monday Night Raw because, again, this is unacceptable. The Rock should not have to, every single show, put the entire company on his back for these damn shows. For them to be fun, for them to be interesting. He was the only talking point last week. The only thing memorable. The only thing we were talking about is the beating The Rock gave Cody. And yet again, it's the only thing we're talking about last night. The only thing that happened that was memorable. You're not talking about anything else. We'll go over the full show. We'll see if maybe I missed anything, right? We'll see if maybe, here we are the next morning, maybe Rhea and Becky's brawl was more badass than I thought it was last night. We'll talk about it. But for this cold open, it's going to be one of the longest cold opens that we've ever done on this show, more than likely. And that's fine. I don't care if this takes 1, 2, or 10 hours. I got plenty of coffee. I got a lot of things to do today, but you know what? They're going to have to be postponed because this is what I'm doing right now. And I got plenty of coffee on deck from the fine folks at Dunkin' Donuts, a freshly brewed in my hand, and many pages of notes, Monday Night Raw, and 3 pages of CM Punk opening up on AEW and Tony Khan. And that's what we're going to talk about for the next several minutes. CM Punk, this is huge. Anybody that tries to sell you, oh, let's just leave it in the past, let's all move on. This is massive. This was one of the biggest free agents in wrestling history. AEW, Tony Khan lands him. And almost immediately it turns sour, goes off the rails. The Hangman Page thing was just the start of it. Jack Perry was the middle of it, and the friction between Punk and Tony Khan was the icing on the cake. The straw that broke the camel's back. And now finally, because to this very day, nobody has uttered a word about what happened. Until late last night, when this interview with Ariel Helwani came out from the MMA Hour, and CM Punk said, gonna get a lot of shit for this, but let's talk about it. He probably saw Tony Khan's interview with Ariel, and Tony basically talked about nothing of relevance. Said, I can't talk about anything that Ariel wanted to talk about. Punk was like, nah, we're adults, let's talk. As long as the NDA permits. Or maybe I don't have any NDA on certain topics. Let's talk about what I can talk about. I want to talk some CM Punk in this cold open. It's going to be a long one. The Monday Night Raw review will be later. So grab your beverage. We're going to get amplified. We're going to have really good discussion. This is going to be one of those uploads that's going to stand the test of time. To my amplified unit, salute. Let's do this one big. Let's do it amplified. I want to start with Punk talking WWE before we get into the AEW stuff. Real quick, just to clarify some stuff, because Punk finally put some exclamation points on some topics that the community was kind of indifferent about, right? Like, first and foremost, Ariel asked, was there an audible called for the Royal Rumble once he was injured? Punk answers, Without hesitation, no. There was never an audible. He says, but it's good that people think there was, right? Just the more times his name is ran, more his price goes up. He says, no, absolutely not. There was not an audible. So Cody Rhodes was supposed to win this thing from the jump. Now, this is huge, and BC is going to break this down as to why. Brian Gerwitz just confirmed that they met with Triple H on January 1st to finalize the plans for Rock and Roman. Already been discussed for a while. They're just going to put the final crossing of the T's and dotting of the I's. And Paul Levesque McMahon is right there with Nick Khan, Rock, Gerwitz. And that was on January 1st. Brian Gerwitz confirms. January 1st, weeks before the Royal Rumble. And Triple H knew they were going Rock, Roman. Paul Levesque McMahon decided to go Cody Rhodes winning the Royal Rumble, even over CM Punk, when Punk was the logical option here. Of course, you could go to the Elimination Chamber and do it that way, but you had to have known that if Cody's winning the Rumble, you're making this dude look like an idiot if he's going to go out there and say, I don't want to take Roman on. I want to introduce this guy to do it, The Rock, because that's what Paul Levesque McMahon did, and it backfired massively. So for anybody thinking he wasn't involved in the conversation or the creative going forward, I'm pretty sure The Rock didn't say, yeah, I'm going to do this with Roman, but I'm going to tell you how to book Cody. Have him win the Rumble. I doubt very much that happened. Levesque McMahon had Cody Rhodes win his Royal Rumble and then proceed to go out there and book Cody Rhodes like an absolute idiot, right next to laying down next to a rubber chicken instead of hoisting up a championship, which should have happened at 39. That's very telling what Punk said. There was no audible. We now have confirmation. Cody was always planned to win this thing and never take on Roman Reigns. He then CM Punk admitted that he did show up unannounced to Monday Night Raw last May under contract with AEW, and he was thrown out. The reports were accurate. He says he had a brief talk with Levesque. Levesque then ratted him out. He said he made a phone call, obviously to Vince McMahon. Ariel even said to Vince. Punk says, yeah. So he ratted him out, called Vince. Vince made sure that he was thrown out promptly. So Levesque McMahon, bro, he'll shake your hand, give you a hug, turn around, stab you in the back, man. That's Levesque McMahon. So he had Punk thrown out. No hard feelings. Punk knew he was an AEW talent, suspension or not, or if anybody knew what his situation was, they just know he's still affiliated with AEW. Probably not the best bet to be in the locker room. So he didn't really have any grudge toward that. He said he did kind of see it coming, but he did confirm that, and he did talk to Levesque, and then moments later he was thrown out. Do the math. He says he signed his new WWE contract before going to Gorilla at Survivor Series. How wild is that? Minutes before this dude went out there at Survivor Series, his big return after a decade, and this dude is still dotting I's and crossing T's on his contract. He says only a handful of people actually knew. Himself, AJ Lee, a couple handfuls. Him, obviously, I think he would know. AJ Lee, his wife, Nick Khan, the man of three H's, lawyers, and some family. That was it. He tells a funny story a few months back. He was on his way to the arena, and he was calling his sister to say, oh, by the way, you're probably going to hear some stuff. I'm back in WWE in about 20 minutes. So this confirms Becky Lynch's story that Seth's reaction that night was legit. You know, there's all these stories. Did the wrestlers there know or did they not? Then there was a story, well, they found out right beforehand, like an hour before, 20 minutes before. Then there's Randy Orton saying he kind of knew Punk was coming back. He meant overall, because no evidence is showing that any of these wrestlers knew at all. Punk is saying he told nobody, and he says as far as he knows, Levesque McMahon and Nick Khan told nobody. I mean, he literally went to Gorilla minutes before he was going out. And if you see the reaction from everybody, Judgment Day, who lost that War Games match, they're not selling. They all huddled together next to the faces and they're just watching. Nobody was selling anything and we're live on pay-per-view. And they're just chilling right next to the people that beat them up in War Games. And you could see Corey Graves, who's had issues with Punk. They used to be friends and then they had a falling out. And him and Michael Cole are trying to tell Seth to calm down. They're trying to tell him what they're being told in their earpiece with the referees. And everything was just organic. I told you guys when I went back and watched that 1,005 times, and everything looked like real reaction. And Seth knew he had to react like that anyway. He was going to look like an idiot. Punk said some things about him. He said a lot of stuff about Punk over the years, and here Punk is right there. Seth is going to look like a moron. This dude just had a War Games match, and Punk is going to get all the headlines. You got raw emotion. And Becky Lynch just, 48 hours ago, this interview came out where Becky said, no, I was in Gorilla. I was like, what the Punk? And they gave a little fist dap or whatever. And then he went out and she saw her husband flipping out and she was like, this is not good. So I'm pretty sure Seth would have told Becky, oh, by the way, did you hear Punk's coming back? I'm pretty sure he probably would have said, listen, I'm going to do something big tonight. So everything is leaning toward they just didn't know. Nobody, again, Judgment Day wasn't selling at all. They were huddled up next to the faces. I mean, everything stopped right at that moment. Everybody was watching like they're fans at that point. It's wild. Very interesting to hear that he signed right before Gorilla, and those that knew were not the ones that were in the ring at the time. He then confirmed that they did try to transition that into a Mania match, and that was, at the time of the injury, that was going to be the proposed WrestleMania main event for night 1. Before, obviously, it turned into a tag match because the main event of night 2 got changed. It was going to be Seth Rollins, CM Punk. They were going to turn that into some good business, which is what Punk said he tried to do many times in AEW. They just wouldn't do it. But they were going to turn this organic reaction and friction into good business, and that was the match for Mania. Seth was taking time off anyway. The title's coming off him. It's going to Drew now, but Punk was going to be that guy. He was this close from his WrestleMania main event, the thing he's been chasing for years and years, and he was this close. He also confirmed, now we go over to the AEW stuff. This is where it gets kind of, he does not... It was like a dude in therapy that just wanted to get it all off his chest. Wait till you hear what he said. And it's refreshing, not just because we get the scoop, but it's refreshing just to get the what is so confidential? It happened, get it out there, man, so we can all just fucking move on. Otherwise, people are still going to try to find out what happened on that note. Who, was there a fight? Who was more out? Did Larry bite Omega's foot or ankle? And by the way, we have a little update on that as well, but let's start from the jump, man. He confirms that in London, August 2023, AEW, what was that? All Out? All In, All Out. I get them all mixed up. I think it was All Out. But it was the London, August 2023. Punk arrived. And now again, this is London for the third time. London. Nobody was there to pick him up. He says, I just think it's completely irresponsible as a company. That was a huge story. You guys remember? I don't know if Punk was making fun of it himself and that's how it became a big story, or just some dirt sheets got wind of it. But that was a massive story. And even Punk was like, some people are like, can't you just get an Uber? Of course I can get an Uber. It's just irresponsible as a company to leave your top star, or any star, but especially your top star. He arrives to London and you have no transportation for him. So he's trying to find his way through their train system or whatever system they have over there in London. He then goes on to say, on AEW as a whole, Tony's big idea, this was after the friction, and we'll go back to the brawl out. And by the way, this is a quote from CM Punk. Tony's big idea was separate shows. We're going to separate everybody. I said that'll never work. Just pay me my money, let me go. Just let me get out of here. He said, no, we can't let you go. I said, why? These people don't want me here. He said, this isn't a real business. This isn't a business predicated on making money and drawing money. or even selling tickets, doing business in general. It's not what it was sold to me as. Tony said, no, we just can't let you go. So Punk is saying he told Tony straight out, this is just not how you do business. He's trying to teach Tony how to do business. This is not a good situation. Just let me get out of here. Just give me the money that's owed and let's go our separate ways, or this probably will just get worse. And Tony's just like, no, clinging on to him. He goes on to say that Collision, or at Collision, this was the big Jack Perry incident. He says Jack Perry was backstage basically flipping out at everybody. Tony Schiavone was asking for his help. He wanted Punk's help because Jack Perry's going into business for himself and just causing a scene. So Punk said, I don't think you want me to do that. Schiavone's like begging him, no, just can you just please come out here? So Punk says, all I know is there is a litany of people in that company. A litany of people in that company that work 1 day a week and they don't want to. 1 day a week and they don't want to. So they want to show up, wrestle, and then film vignettes and then sit at home for 4 weeks. That's wild. He's saying there's people in that line. You guys can draw the conclusion on who he's talking about. But he says, all I know is there's a litany of people in that company that work 1 day a week and they don't want to. So they want to show up, wrestle, film some vignettes, and sit at home for 4 weeks. Great, not my company. Do what you want, but not on my show. Because he truly looked at Collision and the way that it was sold to him as, listen, this will be your baby. This is your chance to start anew. And basically from day one, it just went south pretty quickly. Punk describes Jack Perry wanting to smash a rental car's window with a pipe. So Punk said, no. You want to do that, go to Wednesdays, but not on my show. So he told Jack Perry, he goes, we're not doing that on Saturdays. You want to do shit like that, go to Wednesdays. So at that point, Punk said there was no big argument or anything like that, really, that stemmed off of that. Perry was just like, but that's fine, whatever. And they kind of went their separate ways. But he then says it's very much who he's friends with. Things never got squashed. No one is in charge, and it turned into what it did. That is huge, man. Listen again. It's very much who he's friends with. Things never got squashed because no one is in charge. And it turned into what it did. He then went on to say Tony Khan. Or he went to Tony Khan right afterwards. And he said, and I quote, please handle this. Tony responded, well, what do you want me to do? And Punk says, I don't know, just be the boss. That's a quote. Please handle this. Tony Khan says, what do you want me to do? CM Punk says, I don't know, just be the boss. That's sad. Punk says TK never handled it. When all was said and done, Tony Khan never actually handled what Punk asked him to. Punk says TK never handled it. Then we fast forward to AEW in London. This is the same. Now, mind you, Punk's already a little pissed because he showed up and nobody was there to pick up. There was no vehicle service. There was no... He had to find his own way to this stadium. Now, it's a stadium. Okay, you're going to, it's pretty accessible. You're going to find your way, but he's already pretty perturbed that nobody even cared to pick him up at the airport. So he gets to the arena. He's on pretty early. Perry's match is going to be before his. Perry uses the real glass in his matchup. He says what he says, obviously. Real glass, cry me a river, and something else, Jack Perry says. So this gets back, obviously, to CM Punk. So Punk's match was next. So they met each other pretty quickly, right? Perry's coming back. Punk is up next. Punk says he walks up to Perry and he says, Jack, why do you insist on doing this internet bullshit? Perry responds, well, if you have a problem, why don't you do something about it? I said, come on, man. I'd fucking kill you. I didn't punch anybody, says CM Punk. I just choked somebody a little bit. Samoa Joe was there. He told me to stop, so I quit. I turned to Tony and said, please. I said, no. I said, this place is a fucking joke. You're a clown. I quit. Wow. So after the incident, Samoa Joe breaks up CM Punk off of Perry and the choke that Punk had on him. He turned to Tony Khan and he says, and I quote, this place is a fucking joke. You're a clown. I quit. Wow, bro. That's heavy. Now, this is where Tony Khan said he was fearing for his life at that point. Like there was this rage in CM Punk he's never seen before, and he actually feared that Punk was going to go, way out of bounds. And Ariel asked about that too. Ariel asked, his thoughts on TK saying that he feared for his life, and Punk responded, "The truth is the truth." This is huge. Listen to this. He says, "The truth is the truth. He's not a boss. He's a nice guy. Ultimately, that's a detriment to the company. I'm an outsider. I thought I was brought in to sell merchandise and tickets, but that's not what this place is about. Some people didn't like that." So he says, the truth is the truth. He's not a boss. He's just a nice guy. And basically, you can't just run a company just on that alone. You have to be the boss. You have to make hard decisions. You have to step in and hold people accountable and responsible. You have to know what is a reliability and a liability. Being a boss means many things. You can't just be nice. Wild. Jumping to his feud with Hangman Page. This was big, right? He gives a lot of insight. This is so telling, man. A lot of insight here. He says that they talked about what they were going to say in their promo. It was all business. Nobody had any issues. They were like, cool. See you out there. So they go on live TV, and he says Page proceeded to go on live TV and say none of it. None of what they talked about. He said none of it. He starts going in the left field with a hockey stick, and Punk says, and I quote, "I couldn't even respond to what I was going to, what we talked about, because it no longer makes sense." Because he says, I don't even know what he literally says, I don't even know what he was talking about. I just know that now I had to switch up everything I was going to say. And I was thinking at the time, why would you lose all this business we were going to create? Like, why would you do that on live TV? Afterwards, Punk asked Page, why did you do that? Page felt that Punk got one of his friends fired. We believe that to be Colt Cabana. But we can't put words into Punk's mouth. That's all he would disclose. He just said his response to me was that he felt that he got one of his friends fired. It sounds like Cabana just had such a tight-knit group with the Bucks and Hangman and so many others, and this union was already formed, and Punk, with his attitude and the way that he carries himself, that was literally, I call it a marriage that was just, from the day of the marriage, it was intended for straight divorce. This was never going to work. Now, as far as the all-out media scrum, we call it Brawl Out, he said he didn't know he was going to unload like he did until he saw all of the so-called reporters. I love this. Those media scrums, and they just invite some YouTubers, some podcasters, some dirt sheets, maybe Meltzer's in there, And he says these so-called reporters he's looking at, and he says, who are clearly just friends with some of the wrestlers. It's like high school cliquey bullshit, he says. And here I am looking at these goofs. He says, these scrums are cringe. I just love that. They really are. Just watching Tony Khan for the full hour in the media scrum is a little like... He's animated for sure. It makes for a good discussion, that's for sure. But Punk says these are just, he's looking at these goofs. He says the scrum is so cringe. He's looking at all these people that just write dirt anyway. And he said, no, I'm just going off. He cannot talk about what happened after the scrum due to the signed NDA, even alluding to his triceps injury possibly happening during the backstage fight, or at least the injury getting more worse during that fight. So he alludes to it. He didn't say that's what happened, but alluded to it. Ariel asked. He couldn't say anything. It's in the NDA. He says nobody talked to him for 6 months afterwards. After Brawl Out, nobody from the company during his rehab, and he had no help. Not even Tony Khan was like just seeing how everything was. He had no help. He says that's the difference between WWE and AEW. One has structure, protocols, and professional people in charge of things. I mean, I didn't even know where to turn for PT, physical therapy, he said. He didn't know what to do during his injury, and he was getting no word of what was going on, what he should be doing, any good places that he should be going to. I mean, this is Tony Khan. This is a dude who, his father runs the Jaguars. I mean, when it comes to sports, they know the best of peoples. He says, I don't think, this is huge. He actually mentions the Jaguars. He says, I had no help, nothing from AEW. And that's insane to me. Is that how they would treat the Jaguars players, he says. This is just Punk. This is like a therapy session. Punk's just letting it go, man. Is that how they would treat Jaguars players? He says, I don't think anybody should be treated like that if you're a professional athlete. I had no help. No one would speak to me. In closing on AEW in its totality, Punk says, I know a lot of people are going to be upset about this, but their business is just not a real business. I need a sip for this. You guys are going to want to, if you got a coffee or a beverage, take some now. You're going to want to hear this. Because this is pretty massive. He says, I know a lot of people are going to be upset about this, but their business is just not a real business. It's not about selling tickets. It's not about making money. It's just not. It's just about good matches. If you're more happy with some goof saying that you had a 5-star match and the building is a quarter full, we're not in the same business. I'll repeat that. CM Punk says if you're more happy with some goof saying you've had a 5-star match and the building is a quarter full, we're not in the same business. And he said 3 or 4 times in this interview how it's for a niche audience. And that's the business they're in, for their niche. And he alludes, just like BC so many times, that what happens when the niche starts walking away, right? Their niche was 950,000 for a while. When Punk was there for sure, 950. And with or without Punk, you started to see a decline, even when he was gone for months. But now they're around 750, 800 is their top. So where did 150 to 200,000 of their niche go on a week-to-week basis? And if that drops any further, you're going to NXT numbers. And out of all the big major shows that have a prime time spot on cable television on a prominent channel, NXT is obviously the worst. Barely pulling in 500,000 viewers at times. Well, AEW is a stone's throw away from that. So Punk is trying to say that that'll never be real business if that's what you're just going to cater to. If you're more happy with some goof saying that you've had a 5-star match, of course, he's fully taking Dave Meltzer, throwing him under the bus, riding him over him with the bus, putting the bus in reverse, and Meltzer has no chance of getting out from underneath that bus. If you're more happy with some goof saying you've had a 5-star match and the building is a quarter full, we're not in the same business. Wow, man. This was Punk at his most vivid. I've never been the biggest Punk fan. There was a time that I was. I didn't like him shitting on the business when he left. I felt the bitterness cross I understand some of it, right? The papers on the wedding day. I get it. I felt it cross the line, and he started shitting on pro wrestling and fans and acting like the big shot. And he was better than wrestling. That's when BC really got just like, I've had enough, as many fans did. I've never been the biggest fan, but I mean, this, love him or you don't like him, love him or hate him, this is CM Punk just like letting everything that he can say, he went out and said. He guaranteed, no. Guaranteed money. Just some side notes. He talked about how guaranteed money in some ways killed pro wrestling because it stopped the drive in pro wrestlers. And that's something that we've been talking about recently, right? Undertaker got a lot of heat because he says he's walking through locker rooms today and everyone's just playing video games and so chill. And on one hand, that's cool. You're relaxed. On the other hand, it's like, don't you want to work on your character or anything? Or don't you want to go over things? Or the Undertaker is walking by you. Don't you want to like talk about your segment later? What do you need help with? Nothing. Everyone just wants to play video games. Everyone's so relaxed. And then on the Bray Wyatt documentary, Finn Balor was talking about how everybody was talking about how Bray was just always thinking about his character, how to develop it, how to grow it, how to make his segment and the television the best that it can be, always thinking of ideas. I mean, this was 24/7. And Finn Balor was talking about how he would always just see Bray. And there was one specific time where he was going to say something. He was walking by and he just saw Bray in a corner going over his promo. And you could tell like he was trying to like really feel it and like zone in on how he wants to portray this promo. And Finn Balor's like, he literally says on this doc, he says, and I quote, I remember thinking, man, I wish I had that type of dedication to my character. Something along those lines. And on one hand, I respect Finn Balor and his honesty. On the other hand, I'm like, then why don't you get that dedication? Why are you in WWE? Or why would you even be on the independents if you don't have dedication to your character? You think just going out there and doing some suicide dives, a coup de grace, some flips and some dives, and that's it? Your character is everything. You know, looking back at it, it's no wonder he didn't want to be the demon anymore, right? It was just too much work. He says he didn't want to use it as a crutch. No, he just didn't want to do the crawling and putting on the paint and all that. And that was some real insight into Balor, right? He says, I'm looking at Bray and all this dedication that he's putting into his character and his segment for that night. And he's like, man, I wish I had that type of dedication. Listen, I respect the honesty, but that gives you great insight into that locker room these days. And Punk says in this interview, he says one of the biggest differences is that back in the day, everybody was just on it, right? Because you had to protect your spot. And you didn't know if you were going to be there the next week or a month or the next day. And if something failed, you had to work triple, quadruple, 10 times the amount of work the next day to make it work for the next week. Because everything was riding on it. You didn't have guaranteed money. And now everybody's got guaranteed contracts and they're all just laying back, collecting their paychecks, playing video games. And you wonder why there's not really characters anymore, right? You wonder why the Rocks and the Stone Colds and the Hogans and the Warriors and the Savages and the Pipers and the Flairs and the Bray Wyatts even. You wonder why they're gone and nobody's really in their league. Nobody is even in their category. It's because they really had to fight for it. Everything was on the line and the dedication had to be there. It was fun to show up to work. And even if there was a little chip on your left shoulder and some fear on your right shoulder, man, that mixed in with the adrenaline and it brought out the very best in these wrestlers, man. It brought out the very best. When Hulk Hogan got stale, it made Terry Bollea become Hollywood Hulk and the NWO. Or when Rocky Maivia was failing miserably, you didn't know if this dude was going to be in the company the next month, The Rock was born. When the Ringmaster and Stunning Steve didn't work, Stone Cold was born. You constantly strive to get better. What is becoming stale? What is not working, right? That's great that we talk about how Xavier Woods has up, down, down, and he loves his video games, and Asuka and Cody and all of them, they come into the locker room, they play video games. But you know what I see? I see Xavier Woods and Kofi. I see the New Day stale, and they have been for years, and I see nothing changing. Nothing. The New Day is so irrelevant that the video game talk is more what they're known for these days. When I think Xavier, I think video games. I don't even think pro wrestler anymore. That's sad. I'm just using that as an example, by the way. Where is that dedication? Why are people like Finn Balor saying, I wish I had Bray's dedication? Find it. Go get it. Because that Bray was way after the times, if you ask me, because he should have been with that. He would have thrived even to another level, if that's even possible or imaginable, if he was in the Attitude Era, brah. Or the Golden Era. Ruthless aggression. But here he was ostracized. He was put in a category of, oh, he's just some weird dude, man. He cares about this way too much. Fans even, right? Because it's that niche fan is like, he can't put on the 6-star bangers, man. All that supernatural stuff that's captivating people. We don't want to be captivated by pro wrestling. We just want to enjoy pro wrestling, right? The flips, the dives, we want to do some chants. This is awesome. That's all we want to do these days in 2024. Nobody wants characters that are larger than life. No, but that's BS. The majority still wants that. Bray Wyatt proved that. His ratings, always top. Above everybody else, even rivaling and beating Roman Reigns. Merchandise, he was the only dude at the time to beat Roman Reigns twice. Metrics on the tube and other platforms, Bray Wyatt number 1, even over Roman Reigns. People told you, they spoke volumes. We want the dude that's dedicated the most. So that was just interesting. All of that little side rant, CM Punk talks about that, how guaranteed money in some ways killed pro wrestling in a way. It stopped the drive, he said. And it's just interesting because we've been having that conversation. These guys and gals in the locker room these days, they're chill and they're relaxed. That's great, right? Mental health, that's awesome. Perhaps too relaxed. Nobody cares as much as they once did. And that shows. So many characters, they're just the same, or they're just beyond stale, or a mixture of both. He also says, and this will be the last thing on the Punk thing, Punk makes reference to Larry the dog. Ariel says, oh, Larry had your back in that brawl out scrum afterwards, because you guys remember there was this infamous story that Larry the dog actually got involved and helped out Punk, even bit Omega's leg, something like that. So Ariel says, oh, Larry had your back, huh? And Punk says, and I quote, oh, did he? Literally, like with a laugh, like, oh, did he? Like, oh, he had my back. So that tells you that Larry wasn't just in the room. Larry jumped into the fight, bro. Larry was ready to rock. And it sounds like Larry did rock. Larry was in a tag team with CM Punk against the Young Bucks. And Omega was caught up in the middle, because we did hear reports that Omega was trying to break some things up, and Omega's the one that got bit. Again, we don't know the exact. Punk didn't go into detail, probably because it is because of the NDA. But he says, oh, did he? So Larry did do something, man. Larry was involved in this backstage brawl. Hopefully, one day, they'll release that, right, on the behind the scenes of All Out in London. All joking aside, man, what a listen. Just reading a lot of this back is like, wow, we finally have insight on a lot. And you say, well, that's one person's story on it, BC. Well, yeah, but I mean, we've heard a lot of chirping from the people in AEW, obviously, but unless they have anything that counters any of this, it sounds like Punk was just being legit about it. Like, you could tell when somebody's just bullshitting or just wanting to just tell you their side. It sounded like at times he actually would rather not speak on it, but he's like, screw it, man. I decided to do this. I'm not going to give Ariel fluff. This is what happened. So take that for what you guys will. This was a massive look inside the relationship between Tony Khan, AEW, and CM Punk, a marriage that was destined for divorce from day one. Wow, the longest cold open in probably this channel's history, but That is massive. It needed to be talked about. Big swig of coffee. We're going to go into Monday Night Raw's review, a show that I am calling uninspiring, underwhelming, and unacceptable. Unacceptable. This was a go-home show, and you never would have known it. If not for The Rock and Roman and what they did at the end of it, because wait till you hear the beginning of it. You talk about taking Brooklyn that was lightning hot at the start of the show and absolutely setting them up to sit on their asses for the rest of the night. Wait till you hear what they did at the start of the show. This is almost like Levesque McMahon just trolling Brooklyn in fans. Just fucking with them. I got to go back to the Raw pages. Hold on, guys. 1 second, please. Make sure I got the right date, April 1st. All right, so here's the deal. WWE Raw 4/124. It's the go-home show. The Rock kicks it off. And his entrance, by the way, keeps getting cooler and just more badass every time. Every time The Rock comes out, there's something new added to it. Now you have the electricity, the new theme, obviously, which is a mix of the old theme as well. But now you have like visuals of like an electric rock, a giant electric rock that keeps on going in and out on the Tron itself. I mean, it is absolutely wild, man. And this is what I mean. This is a dude, he's here for a few months and he's so involved and dedicated to making it better every single time. I just wish today's roster did that. Instead, they cry that The Rock is doing all these awesome things. Get creative. Put down the controllers, the little video game controllers. Stop being so relaxed, right? Put down the 101 Ways to Be Happier book. Put down the book of inspirational quotes. Get off the social doohickey machine and start making your character relevant, badass, and larger than life. Every time The Rock comes out there, the dude's entrance alone was the best part of Monday Night Raw. That's sad, by the way. So The Rock kicks us off, badass entrance. Roman Reigns then comes down, cuts a promo. Sethington then comes down. This was weird because Roman fudged up a little bit on his promo. He said, what did he say? He messed something up. He just switched around some words, nothing big. But then he to try to save it, he was hoping that Seth's music was going to hit. Maybe it was supposed to, like a moment before, and that's what made him kind of hiccup. But he looks up the aisleway as if somebody's come down, but no music was hit yet. So he looks, and then Seth's music hits. It was very strange. Big botch there. Seth comes down from section 405, the nosebleed, so he's coming like the old Shield entrance. And Seth cuts a promo from the crowd. And he lays down a challenge to The Rock or Roman. You guys decide. And I'm talking Brooklyn's electric. I'm like, this is fun. I'm like, this is good, man. It's a hot start. And the finish. Now, Rock and Roman is not going to go out there and have a 10, 15, 20 actual minute match. But just to set it up, no matter what schmozzery they do at the finish, just to promote Rock and Seth or Roman and Seth for later in the night, money. And I don't care what they do. They don't have to have a 10, 15, 20 minute, not even 5. And that's what makes the show special, something to look forward to. How are they going to pull it off? I remember when Vince McMahon was going to take on Stone Cold, and and they did all the gimmickry, right? One hand behind his back. Dude Love ended up interfering, so you didn't actually get Stone Cold versus Vince. But do you guys remember when they announced that at the beginning of the show? That was one of the biggest rated Monday Night Raws in history, maybe the biggest. I would have to go back and do the research. That was one of the biggest rated Raws ever. You had a hot start, and then they promoted Vince versus Stone Cold, and they never really had a match that night. Nobody gave a shit. We were all excited for what's to come, and you watched the show, and everything was just flawless. So promote that. Instead, do you know what they did, guys? The Rock and Roman are like, you're not facing us. You're facing this guy. And Solo Sikoa is on the microphone. Or it was Solo that told Seth, you're not facing Rock, you're not facing Roman. You're going to face me! Mr. 0 and 34, by the way. Crowd is excited. They're pumped up. We're going to get Seth and Roman or Seth and Rock tonight. Crowd is excited until they realize they're getting Mr. O and 34 Solo Sikoa. I just put up an upload yesterday talking about how Solo Sikoa's losing streak has made its way to 34. And after last night, he didn't win again. They threw the match out, actually. 2 matches last night. Paul Levesque McMahon was hoping you didn't notice that there was no winner or loser. We'll talk about it when we get to those sections. But this dude was 0-34. John Cena did the ultimate deed, got annihilated by Solo, and then he took off. And before he took off, he looked at Triple H, and John Cena said, "Here you go, bro. I just made you a star. I didn't just lose to Solo. I got annihilated by him." Because John Cena knew that Triple H absolutely failed him at WrestleMania when he lost to Austin Theory. And look at Theory now. This is a dude that beat John Cena at WrestleMania, and look at Austin Theory. One of 615 dudes going for a tag title at Mania. So Cena said, all right, if we're going to do this, we're going to go big. If I'm going to lose again, I'm going to give you Solo Sikoa. I'm going to give you this dude wrapped up with a bow ready to go through the stratosphere. And John Cena does the ultimate deed, goes back to Hollywood, and Triple H goes, I don't know what to do with this, and throws him in the trash. 0-34. He annihilates John Cena at Crown Jewel, and then he goes on a 34-match losing streak, and that's how you start your go-home show? Seth versus 0-34? That's like Seth Rollins versus Brooklyn Brawler. That's like setting up WrestleMania 8 at the Hoosier Dome in Indianapolis. And your go-home show is Tito Santana versus the Brooklyn Brawler. Or Tatanka versus Barry Horowitz. If you don't know who these people are, by the way, then you're a younger fan, that's fine. But these were the ultimate jobbers. Because Solo Sikoa is nothing more than a jobber. 0-34 is a jobber. That's the exact definition. And that is what we have to look forward to. 3 hours to watch Solo and his 0-34 streak fight in the main event. Yep, that's something to look forward to. It was that bad. And if you guys are wondering, you can go back, because a lot of you guys, you don't watch Raw anymore. I don't blame you. You listen to BC's reviews. If it sounds good, you're going to go back and watch some of it, maybe all of it. And if it's bad, you say, BC, I'm glad I didn't have to watch this. Sorry you had to for us. But I'm telling you right now, you can go back and watch it. You can listen for yourself. That crowd was deflated immediately. There was no reaction to Solo in this match being announced. Nothing. The crowd was pissed. They were deflated, and they did not come back. There was moments during some of the match, if you get enough flips in, like Ricochet, for instance, if you get enough flips and dives, you'd be like, wow! And then immediately they're just like, right back, They never came back like they were at the start of that show. Never. It's not nitpicking, right? We're reviewing the show, and this is what actually happened. You're just going to get the utmost amplified truth on this channel, unlike others. That's what happened on this show. They never came back. So then we go into the first match of the night. Judgment Day defeating DIY in the New Day in an 8-man schmaz match. So they're just taking a bunch of the teams that are going to be wrestling or facing each other. I don't even know what this is. A 6-way tag team ladder match for the titles. And they just took 8 of them. All of the New Day. All of the Judgment Day versus DIY and New Day. And it's like, how is this getting you excited for WrestleMania, man? You set up a Solo Sikoa main event. The dude's not even in WrestleMania, by the way. Solo is not even in Mania. That's our main event. Judgment Day and DIY and New Day is kicking us off. And Judgment Day defeats DIY New Day. Priest pins Tommaso off the Razor's Edge finisher. So Tommaso is looking up at the lights. So many people believe that DIY will be capturing the titles in Philly. So what better way to capture the titles than just lose 5 nights beforehand? Johnny Gargano stupidly injures himself by catapulting himself headfirst into the commentary table and literally landing on his head. That happened, by the way. live TV, Johnny Gargano. No reason at all to do this, by the way. It is unnecessary. I have it in my notes in capital letters. Unnecessary. And yes, I also have in my notes, catapulting himself stupidly in capital letters. Less of that, work on your character. We just discussed it. Do less of all of that. You don't need to do that. And if you do need to do that, if you need to leave your feet constantly, if you need to constantly land on your head, if you need to constantly be upside down, you're probably not good at this wrestling thing. You can go into a sport called gymnastics. And I like Johnny Gargano, man. I mean, I've always said this pro wrestler, he just gets it. I've always said there's a connection there with Johnny Gargano. But there's more to him than that. And I think that's what upsets me more. Like Ricochet, for instance, right? Ricochet on the microphone, carrying storyline. That's not what he's known for. He's literally just known for the flips and the dive. He'll make you go, ooh, ah, in the matches, right? This is awesome. And that's pretty much where it ends with Ricochet. It's sad, right? Big standing ovation for his match. And then afterwards, you never go back and watch again. It's Ricochet. He's a good hand. But with John Gargano, we've seen this dude put many storylines on his back. He's good on the microphone. He's good at storytelling. He can be funny. He can be serious. And to watch him just land on his head as much as he doesn't need to do it. BC, he goes the extra mile. That's a good thing. Okay, do that with your character. That is what should be connecting and getting over with the crowd. Work more on that. We already know you're a good wrestler. You don't need to land on your head like this. Dude launches himself. He was going to be 3 feet past whoever he was leaning in toward or going toward, to the point where the commentary table broke his distance. He probably was going to land in the front row. He goes into the commentary table and lands on his head. Referee keeps going to his black box. Triple H is probably like, damn, he landed on his head. Referee's like, yeah, he did. We hope he's okay. We didn't see him after that. Afterwards, there was after the match ended about a minute later. We see a wide shot and we see a couple of referees helping him to the back. It didn't look good, but we hope the best for him. I just wish these people changed up their style, man, and especially the ones that are better than that. Because how many suicide dives do we see on a show or in a match these days? Too many. It's not even fun. Okay, you launched yourself out of the ring. You could have done a clothesline. It would have gotten the same freaking reaction. In fact, if you know how to sell your clothesline, maybe it's better. A lot safer, too. Gable is that. So again, guys, Judgment Day defeats DIY and New Day. Tommaso takes this loss. Flat on his back, looking up at the lights. Does nothing for Mania. Nothing. This was just a match. It finished. If this got you excited to see that tag team match with 6 tag teams going for the title at Mania, good for you, bruh. This did nothing. And when it was all said and done, we were about 35 minutes into the show, commercial free, and there was nothing worthy to discuss. So then we go into Gable. He's training Sami Zayn, right? This is a video type package, pre-tape. And Zayn is basically Rocky Balboa, and Gable is Mick, if you guys ever seen Rocky. And this is cheesy, and there's some sappy like music playing during the whole promo and training session. This sappy promo where Gable is trying to inspire Sami Zayn. I mean, when I use the word cheesy, I mean, this is like the definition. And the music it was so bad, but it was fun. Right, because it's Gable and Sami, they made it work, right? And that's the praise I can give it, because this was cheesy and it was just bad. And Gable is either helping Zayn at Mania or he's costing Zayn at Mania. I think, right, we all know, like, that's Gable. You're going to get Kaiser, you're going to get Giovanni Vinci, and you're going to get Gable. Now, does Gable help Gunther keep that title because he wants to be the one to go for that title? Or does he just join forces with Gunther, and that sets up Gable and Sami down the road, so Sami doesn't have to win the title, and it still sets up a feud for Sami? Or is Gable the reason Gunther drops the title at Mania, Sami the new champion? It's clear that Gable's going to be the deciding force at WrestleMania. That was the end of hour 1 and the start of hour 2. So actually, after that 8-man tag, we were 45 minutes into the show, not 35. So the first hour commercial free, you're excited, you're thinking this is going to really sell WrestleMania. We get a Gable training package with Zayn, an 8-man schmaz, and an announcement that Solo Sikoa, Mr. 0-34, I can speak, more coffee, BC, Mr. 0-34 is going to be main eventing. That was your first hour. So when BC says uneventful, uninspiring, underwhelming, unacceptable Monday Night Raw Go-Home Show to WrestleMania, this is what I mean. Because I don't say any of this just to hear myself talk. I say it because it's the truth. So we go to hour number 2. Can hour number 2 put some life into this show? Let's find out. Hour number 2 starts with Sami Zayn defeating Bronson Reed via DQ. And when Gunther, first of all, the DQ was because Gunther kind of dragged out Gable from the back, and at the top of the entranceway kind of beat him up a little bit more, and then he walked away. Sami leaves the ring as he's facing Bronson. Sami takes off up the aisleway, attends to a pretty much down and out Gable, and while he's checking on Gable, Gunther comes back, gives him a boot to the mug, and that should have been the bell. Right, that should have been the bell. The funny thing here is that the bell never rang, guys. So Paul Levesque McMahon he's right, because he knew Bronson was not winning this match, nor should he. But he's also like, damn, I got you losing a lot, don't I? I don't even have you at WrestleMania, do I, Bronson? So Levesque is like, I'll tell you what, this is going to be a DQ, but we won't ring the bell and actually say it's a DQ. Because the bell never rang. And it was so funny because you can't put that past Brooklyn, right? This is a smart crowd. So they're like, ring the bell. There was a chant. Ring the bell. Ring the bell. They wouldn't ring the bell. So Paul Levesque McMahon, man, you can't put that past BK. But they never rang the bell. But BC is calling it what it was. This was a DQ, obviously. I guess you could try to twist it and say Zayn was out there so long that before Gunther hit him, Sami got counted out and Bronson won. Either way, you got to ring the bell and make a decision. And then Sami gets back up after being viciously beaten by Gunther. He gets back up. I mean, this is true Rocky, right? He gets back up and he just takes another beating by Gunther once he gets up. So he winds up right back down where he came from. They're really beating this Rocky thing into the ground. I get it, right? It's pro wrestling. You can always do the Rocky storyline and it'll work 9 times out of 10. But when it's this obvious, it comes off as cheesy, right? The music montage as they're doing the training session. Sami willing his way back to his feet and getting knocked out. And Gable, the coach. There was ways to make this less cheesy is what I'm saying. They just went all out Philadelphia Rocky. Man, I don't know, man. It crossed the line a little to cheesy here. But that's what they decided to go with, man. Ivy, Nile, and Maxxine Dupri then defeat Candice LeRae and Indi Hartwell. Maxxine pins Hartwell via the awe-inspiring, ultra-devastating fruit roll-up. I'm going to say that again. Maxxine rolled up Indi Hartwell, who's not a small girl. She's very tall. There's a build on her. And little Maxxine rolled her up, and Indi just could not get her shoulder a centimeter off the canvas. That's the story that was told by Paul Levesque McMahon with these 4. Indi Hartwell loses to Maxxine. That period is sad. If you're Indi Hartwell, anyway. At this point, the show has taken a drastic turn, and it is just dragging. At that point, I was looking at the clock nonstop, and when I do that, that's never good, because that's when you know the show is not good. It's like watching a pot of water boil, or watching paint dry, or watching Monday Night Raw usually. And the bad news was we were just into hour number 2. I had a lot of time left, And it was dragging, man. Ever since Solo was called for the main event, then we go into an 8-man schmaz, and then we're watching Bronson Reed and Sami Zayn for 13 minutes. That was the match time. And then we're watching Ivy Nile and Max Dupri versus Indi, Hartwell, and Candice LeRae. I'm thinking, what are we doing, man? Like, how is any of this, like, pertaining to WrestleMania? Thankfully, Drew McIntyre was up next to save a little bit of this show, right? Drew was, what was Drew doing? He was at like a funeral home, and he was delivering a eulogy for CM Punk's career, basically, especially his WrestleMania plans. That went to shit. And Drew McIntyre says, "Look in my eyes. What do you see? CM Punk has no match in Philly." So Drew McIntyre and The Rock, those are the two brightest spots of the shows they've been on. So I got to give Drew McIntyre some props. Unfortunately, that was only about 2 minutes, and then it was right back to the ring. Ricochet defeats Ivar via a 978, 562, 394 splash, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know how many flips were in this thing, but Ricochet delivers this splash, and this dude literally did about 76 flips in this match. And if I'm exaggerating, it's by a little bit, man. Ricochet did about 76 flips in this match. There was no selling. It was just on to the next. You couldn't properly sell. After every move, there was just like a little wince, right? Like, ready for the 456, 590, 50 plancha splash? Let's go. Bronson could sit on this dude like he did 3 times in this match, and Ricochet was back up in 10 seconds to do his Wild Hawk 450 fucking Canadian plancha splash. So he just has to work so hard to get that response throughout this match. And you guys can watch it yourself. Throughout the match, no matter how many flips he was doing, right? I think WWE was hoping that by mid-match, everybody was going to be on their feet screaming, "This is awesome." If you guys watch the match, everyone was sitting down. Pretty quiet. No chance, no nothing. Brooklyn is not just going to give you those. I love that about them. So he had to work really hard, and it wasn't until the end where he actually carried Bronson. Bronson launched himself into the corner, and then Ricochet just tossed him over his shoulders. And that's when people were like, all right, for a small dude, pretty strong. And then he did the 978, 562, 394 splash. And that's when everybody was finally off their feet. All right, this is at least better. And by that point, it was done. That was the finish. 1, 2, 3. So, and this is one of those things where CM Punk literally said in this interview that we went over. He literally was talking about how there's doing all the moves, and then he talked about going to an independent show recently, and somebody going up to him and asking for advice, what do you think about this match? And he said well, which way do you want me to say it, right? Because having a good match is important, he says, but what I would tell you is to sell, right? To take your time to sell. And he's basically alluding to these kids, are they going to take that advice? They're just going to want to do just a shit ton of moves. And he says that in this interview. So I got to give Punk props for that, man, because he's not afraid to talk about how less is more, man. Relax. And again, I said the same thing about Gargano. If you have to get dropped on your head 1,000 times, if you have to do 76 flips in a wrestling match, maybe it's time to go back to the drawing board and see if you can sustain a long career in a better, more efficient way. Because I promise you, in a few years, Ricochet's not doing all of this. And if you don't work on if you don't work on this, your microphone skills, because Ricochet's just not great on the mic, not good on the mic. If you don't work on that, all of this will put you in the unemployment line eventually. It's just wild it's just, the big thing is this, and I say this sincerely, at what point are we crossing the line of pro wrestling into actual gymnastics, right? That's not just a fun little thing to say, right? All the wrestlers today are like gymnasts, right? You hear that a lot. But honestly, at what point, I understand wrestling evolves, and a lot of times that's not for the better, by the way, but different eras, right? Different generations. At what point are we crossing the line of the basic fundamentals, the core of pro wrestling and what it's founded and based upon? Are we crossing that line so vividly into gymnastics? Because what I was watching last night was a lot less of pro wrestling and a lot more gymnastics. I couldn't believe the amount of non-stop flips and dives in this match. Absolutely freaking wild. Just to get and again, if you watched, it wasn't till the end where the crowd finally stood up. All of that, it was it's fitting, right? To exactly what I'm saying. All of that work to finally get them to stand up at the end. And you get some wrestlers, the second their music hits, they don't even got to come through the curtain yet. The second their music hits, that crowd's on their feet. Maybe The Undertaker is on to something. Maybe CM Punk is on to something. Maybe Bray Wyatt is on to something. Maybe BC is on to something. And the biggest thing for me, what am I watching? Ricochet vs. Ivar is the go-home show to WrestleMania. What do they have to do with me? Ivar isn't even in Mania. Ricochet is not in Mania. Maxxine Dupri. Candice LeRae. Indi Hartwell. Nile. Bronson Reed. Solo Sikoa. Everybody, it seems, on this show was not even involved in WrestleMania this weekend. And this is what's selling us on WrestleMania. That right there is why Paul Levesque McMahon needs to get Das Boot. Man, I wish The Rock and Brian Gerwitz was full-time, because I tell you, if they were running this show, we'd have entertaining segments one after the other every week, every month, every year. Pro wrestling would truly be booming, and not just WWE making record profits. Ratings would be through the roof. Not just doing better because Rock is back. And then we go into, I think we're hour 3 now, right? Becky Lynch and Rhea Ripley have a 90-second pull-them-apart brawl. That was it. They did something where Rhea Ripley was was that the Ariel interview that she was on? And then Becky, they did a whole thing with that, which is pretty cool. That should have been mapped out better and more time given to it, by the way. And then in the ring, they just did a pull-them-apart 90-second brawl. And then when we came back, another 30 seconds of a pull-them-apart brawl. This is a Levesque McMahon, just one of those redundant creative ideas that just Levesque McMahon plays on a loop. Just the non-stop pull-them-apart brawls. And if you do so many, when they're really needed, they're no longer special. They're not as prestigious as they should be. So this is just Rhea and Becky just brawling, and it had no effect whatsoever. And then we went into a 6-woman tag: Dakota Kai, Asuka, and Kairi versus Shayna Baszler, Zoey Stark, and Tegan Nox. I don't know who's face and heel anymore. I don't know if Shayna and Zoey are supposed to be faces now, because every week they're playing something different. And I don't know if Tegan is supposed to be a face or a heel. Did she turn on Natty when they were together? Maybe. I recall something like that maybe happening, but it was so irrelevant. I don't know. I know Dakota and Tegan have history. But this was Kairi pinning Nox via the insane elbow. Nox towards the end goes to cannonball herself into Dakota and yells as she's running, "Move!" Yells. Clearly, nobody told Tegan Nox that she was on live television, brah. BC is like, what the fuck? Somebody tell her this is televised. Somebody tell her this is live. I could not believe as she's yelling, "Move!" Dakota is either gonna move on her own or you just lay into her. But don't scream to the hard cam, "Move!" Or at least throw your elbow up over you as you're running, right? Move! You're blocking that shit. I don't know what Nox was thinking. And unfortunately for Nox, with her injuries, both legs, was that the ACL, MC? I don't even know, but it was 2 bad leg injuries. Unfortunately, she's about 65-70% of what she once was. So, I mean, with her, she has to work kind of overdrive because she has to do a lot more to get over in this industry because she's had so many setbacks. But you can't do things like that. That'll take people right out of the match. Thankfully, there was only a few seconds left in the match, so we can just easily forget about it. But for the sake of these reviews, it has to be discussed. So a 6-woman tag match. I don't know, at the end of this match, did that get you pumped up for WrestleMania? That's the theme of this review, right? Did any of this make you go, damn, I can't wait for Mania? Did you see that Zoey Stark, Shayna Baszler, and Tegan Knox 6-woman tag? Well, BC, it was for everybody to see Damage Control in a 6-woman tag before Jade, Naomi, and Bianca. Does that make it any? Did it make you excited to see the match at Mania then? If it did, good for you. Because I can speak for the majority of us. That was so damn boring. Because there was nothing in them, and I respect these ladies vividly, obviously. Asuka, Kairi, and Dakota. I don't know what they're doing with Baszler, Zoey, and Knox. So I mean, maybe it was destined to fail from the beginning. I don't even know. This is just filler match after filler match. LeVec McMahon just totally took another week off when he should be producing one of his best shows of the year. LeVec McMahon handed an awesome finish to last week. A good flowing show, I felt. And instead of keeping momentum and consistency, LeVec McMahon's like, I'm all out, man. That's all I had last week. And then we go into the main event, Solo, Sikoa, and Seth Rollins. This was Bloodline Rules, whatever that means. It's just like no DQ, I guess. There's no Bloodline Rules. What the fuck you mean no DQ? No count out? Like, what are you talking about? So there was no winner here. Second time in the night. LeVec McMahon is like, I can't even be bothered to come up with a winner or a loser. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to not ring the bell. So there was no winner. The Rock and Roman Reigns come out. They annihilate Rollins. Cody Rhodes for the save, but they end up annihilating Cody as well. I think Jimmy Uso came out, and then maybe Solo came back to life, and then that was it. And then we saw an uncomfortable whooping for those two, right? Rollins and Cody, they got a whooping for the ages. That was the best part of Raw, easily, right? Drew McIntyre's 2-minute eulogy. What else? That's it. So once again, The Rock and Drew McIntyre putting the show on their back. And this was a whooping. It was done well. But coming off of last week in the way they ended it, it's kind of like we should have done it in reverse. This should have been last week, and then what we got last week to end Raw should have been this week, right? And then you go into Mania. So we did take a few steps back, but Rock and Roman were laying a whooping with the belt, the American Nightmare weight belt. For a second there, I thought that Roman was going to take his championship belt, start whooping. But this was a massive whooping, and then we faded to black, went off the air, but not even that could save the show. By then, you literally witnessed 3 hours of filler bullshit. Forget nothing memorable. Nothing was memorable. But on top of that, it was like, it didn't even get you pumped for Mania. We still are, right? Like, I'm still looking forward to it because this is where the community unites, and we have this one common like thing that we're all going to view and hope is like flawless and just the best thing ever. But it sucks that we have to pretty much manufacture that ourselves because LeVec McMahon refuses to do it. And you have to start to ask, I've been asking, is he even creative enough to do it? You know, Black and Gold, he had a lot of help, but that was years ago anyway, even if it was just him, which it wasn't. But This is not working, man. This is WrestleMania, and these are some of the worst. And you know, they're touting rating successories. You see what there's headlines. WWE touts rating success year over year. Do you realize you're only here? WWE is releasing that because The Rock was able to spark some ratings when he was on the shows. And so for the year to year, they went a 0.4, 0.6, and I think one was a 0.9 over, and it greatly helped them. SmackDown more than anything. But if you look at the week-to-week consistency, you're seeing Raws and WrestleMania season that are 1.6s and 1.7s, and that's the top. So don't be fooled by that either. They found a way they could spin it to their narrative. Hey, I don't blame them. Business is business. So this, because it's the go-home show, because The Rock was advertised, Roman Reigns was advertised, you could pop easily a 1-8 and possibly a 1-9. I'd be pretty much stunned if it was a 2-0 because it wasn't a good enough show. But a 1-8 and a 1-9 I do see in the ratings this week because, again, Rock, Roman advertised. It's the go-home show, man. As it sits right now on this Tuesday, it's 4 days away from Mania. So that alone will get you over 1-8 when they were just doing 1-6s and 1-7s. 1-9 because they got to see, man, are we going to get like a finish like last year? So I think 1-9 wouldn't surprise me. 1-8 guaranteed. I would only be shocked if it's 2.0 plus or a 1-7 in the 1-7s because that's not good at all. That tells you it was a really bad show. I think they'll pull out a 1-8 to a 1-9. I'll be stunned if it's in the 2.0s or the 1-7 and unders. That's what would shock me. So this was not it. This wasn't it. But we got some days to go. I'm sure we'll start to get that excitement back. I was hoping this show would do it. It didn't. The biggest thing to come out of last night was that CM Punk interview. I'm glad we had a chance to discuss it. Until next time, and there will be that next time. Top guys, we are out 4 days away from Mania. BC's got you covered. Stay locked on the channel. Top guys, we are out. BC saying check you. Peace.